Welcome to Obsession Engineering. This is a Yamaha R7 and today we're going to make it better.
Earlier on this year I decided to swap my Ducati 749 out for something which is a little bit more usable on a day-to-day basis, and I discovered that a middleweight sporting twin really kind of suited what I wanted to do on the road. So from new, it had some MT09SP black reservoirs, it had Evotech pillion peg eliminators and Evotech standard spools, a Yamaha tail tidy. It has the Yamaha factory quick shifter, which is on the other side of the bike, and that was pretty much it from new. After I ran it in, I then decided, in celebration of getting a new job, to get the full Akropovich Euro 5 road system, which was eye-wateringly expensive but really improves the look of the bike. It's absolutely a hoot on the road. It's not exactly something you want to be riding long straight A roads on, but put it on a winding road or a B road and it's hilarious. It's a reasonably similar weight and peak power to the old Supersport 400 bikes. So you're looking around about 63, 64 horsepower at the wheel and a similar size and weight. So you can just absolutely fling it around, and whenever you want to absolutely thrash something, you can. It's got the torque that those 400s are missing as well, and it's fairly usable in traffic as well. So you can just absolutely just keep it pinned everywhere. But a few little things to do with it where you can see the budget element has cut in. So the rear shock is quite basic, and similarly the front forks, although they're really good, they tend to get a little bit crashy over bumps and road furniture because the quality and precision of the damping isn't up to a full top end premium product bike. Today we'll be putting a K-Tech Razor R shock and K-Tech RDS cartridges in, sprung for my weight as it stands at the moment, and we'll also be fitting some Spider rear sets, which I acquired for the bike as well, and which are very, very nice.
So now we've got the little Yamaha on the bench and it is time to take the fairing off. Sometimes you can get away with not taking the fairing off to do these things, but to get into these pinch bolts to do them back up later with a torque wrench, we can't get the torque wrench in here, I've double checked, which unfortunately means that basically all of the panels have to come off it. So that adds a little bit of time into the job, but if it has to be done, it has to be done. In the joys of modern fairing panels, this was particularly awkward to take off. This is the way everything's going now. Try and hide all the clips and the fasteners out the way so they're not on show on the outside of the bike. But to take this panel off, there's a trim piece that goes between the tank and over here, you have to take that off. Then there's a trim panel here you have to take off. Then you have to take the belly pan lower off. But to get the side panel off, which is quite big and comes all the way forward, you have to take the headlight out because there's these little sort of yellow push clips down here, and you have to squeeze those and push the panel through at the same time. They're a bit of a faff. I've never actually seen them before. They probably have a Yamaha special tool, which we don't have, so we're using the power of fingers. So we're beginning to make some progress now. The forks are out of the bike. Davey's going to tinker around and start fitting his rear sets, and that means I can be doing forks. So I've taken the preload off, not actually that critical to the way I'm going to take them apart today, it's just sort of good practice so there's no tension on the spring or less tension on the spring. I need to crack the fork cap off, then I need to turn the fork leg round, and then up the bottom of here there is an 8mm headed, probably M8 or M10 pitched bolt that holds the damper into here, and then once I've undone that and the fork cap I can basically just slide the old internals out. Sometimes though, manufacturers Loctite the bolt into the bottom of here and the whole cartridge just spins, and then you have to take all the springs and bits out separately and get a cartridge holding tool in. So I'm hoping these ones will be easy, but there's only one way to find out. So the standard cartridge wasn't too bad to take out, but the bolts didn't want to come out the bottom, so I did have to take the springs and bits off and get a cartridge holding tool on. But now it's off and we can have a look at the basic difference between this standard Yamaha item and this K-Tech IDS system. So they're going to be doing a fairly similar job. The actual construction, the idea behind them, the principle behind it is basically the same between the two. They are an open cartridge, which means that the oil passes in and out of the cartridge between the cartridge and the, like the fork leg outer. It's not a sealed pressurised cartridge like the DDSs or the Batuba Wilson, the Olin stuff. So the main difference is the diameter of the tube, the diameter of the cartridge, and therefore the diameter of the shim stack that's inside them. So in this, it'll be probably a 20mm shim stack, which gives you a certain surface area on the shims. On here, it's a 25mm shim stack, and because we've got more surface area on the shims, you get a more consistent control of the damping oil. The actual piston design and the shimming itself is going to be different in these as well, so these are going to give a different damping characteristic. And then this one is the rebound leg, so at the end of this one it says rebound at the top. This is the rebound leg. The other cartridge has compression damping control in it. And so what they've done is they've separated what each leg does, and in effect that gives you a much nicer control over the adjustment, because the adjustments are completely independent, and it means the oil's actually doing less work. So even though it's going through a bigger shim stack, it's doing less work and it is more consistent. So what you will get is a nicer quality of damping, probably a plusher ride, more control, and more consistency. So it's basically win-win-win, apart from you have to spend quite a lot of money to buy it. So after the oil is drained thoroughly out of this fork leg, what I've done is I've fitted the K-Tech cartridge into the fork leg, and it's basically the same system as the World War I coming out. The bolt in the bottom of the leg goes up, cartridge holder to hold the cartridge in place, and there we go. Next thing I need to do is put oil in it. So we're going to be using Motul factory line 5-weight fork oil, so it's a good quality sort of race spec oil. Pour that into there, set the level quite high to begin with, and then I need to bleed the air out of the cartridge by repeatedly pumping up and down, which sounds more fun than it really will be. So there we go, we have a rebound leg all built up. I've done the preload adjustment, made sure it's got the correct amount of damping clicks in it. It has got a 155mm air gap, which is set with the spring and spacer out and the cartridge compressed. This one was a little bit awkward to bleed up. So in the end what I actually did was I put my K-Tech cartridge tool down and just cracked the fork top, like the top of the cartridge off, and that allowed the air back out the cartridge. So that was the easy way of doing it. But that's it. We have a pair of forks ready, because I've done the other one as well, so we can go and put these back in the bike. Forks are back in the bike. The fork drop through is the same as it was originally, so it's 4mm of sort of gold. We've torqued all the front end up, calipers and everything back on, brakes are pumped up, so the front end is tickety-boo. So the next thing to do is move down the back. And luckily, while I've been doing forks, Dave has been fitting his lovely Spider rear sets, which mean instead of having to put an ABBA stand in the swinging arm pivot, we can just put the bike on footrest stands, and that will allow us to get the shock out. And because it's quite exposed in there, it's going to be pretty easy, hopefully. So the bike is on footrest stands and the shock is out. The advantage of it being 2 bolts that are easily accessible of, it doesn't take very long. So that is out, and that is the standard shock there, which, interestingly, at the end you can see more has a nice little anodised bit down here by the adjuster, and it looks quite nicely sort of aluminium, and the end that's sort of buried up in the bike is welded together steel and pressed bits of tat, basically. Obviously, these aren't the most expensive bikes, and the usual place to save money is suspension, and so that will have been budget basement. Whereas this is not budget basement. This is the K-Tech Razor R shock, and you can tell just by sort of looking at it, you've got nicely machined bits of aluminium, you've got slightly nice adjusters down here, there's a ride height option at the bottom, a rebound adjuster there, compression adjuster on the cartridge, on the cylinder, and it's just, you know, a much nicer item. And it will quite fit with the colour scheme on this bike, which is a complete fluke. Right, so that is shock fitted and torqued up. I don't have the security type Torx bolt to get that out, so Dave has volunteered to do this at home, so that's not obviously its final attachment point, but it is somewhere near. So the shock is in. So the next thing to do is put the sort of mounting plates for the frame back on there and all of the bodywork back on, which I'm sure will be a mere 5 minutes work. And we are back to having a complete bike. Putting the fairing panels on is not a 2-minute job, but they're actually not too bad now that we know where most of the fasteners go, and we only had several fasteners left over, so I think that's probably not bad going. So I think the next thing to do is get it off the bench and have a little bounce around on it.
Oh, pheasant. Stupid animal. Forks first, they're absorbing the bumps in a much more controlled fashion. Under reasonably heavy braking, the weight transfer and the dive is better. And as a result, it's taking a lot of the discomfort off of the wrists. So it's probably going to extend the effective range of the bike a reasonable amount. Previously I was managing about an hour and a half, maybe 2 hours riding before the hands and the wrists became a little bit too sore to continue without a break. And just by dint of having better suspension, hopefully I'm going to be able to spend a little bit more time in the saddle. The rear shock, similar situation. It's definitely dealing with the bumps better. The feel is good, the comfort is good. The new pegs, they're really good actually. They're slightly further back and slightly higher up, so there's a little bit more room when you're on the balls of your feet. The pegs, although they're a little bit shorter, are much more grippy than the standard road items, which is good. I like that. I prefer a grippy peg. The quick shifter, the action of it has actually been improved slightly with the Spider rear sets. The linkage is a bit more precise, a little bit more accurate. It hasn't been glitchy or missed any changes the way the original Yamaha unit did. Bike changes direction well. That's not really that unchanged. Obviously we haven't changed the geometry, but we have definitely improved our wheel control with the better damping. So all in all, the bike is riding much smoother. The feel and the control that we're getting from the suspension does make it feel like it's turning quicker. It's ride quality is improved quite a lot, and at the same time it's given a little bit more confidence. You know that if you hit a bump mid-corner, it will hold its line better, and it's giving my hands and wrists a much easier time in the process. I'm very happy with both the suspension and the rear sets. They've taken what was a really good bike for throwing it down a little B road like this and turned it into a great one. I think the mods we've done here are notably more effective, much more enjoyable from the outcomes than hunting more power would have given us. So there we go. A quick ride on a slightly modified Yamaha R7.
At Obsession Engineering, we are of course very pleased that Dave is enjoying his much improved R7. If you'd like us to improve your bike, drop us a message through the website obsessionengineering.co.uk.